Hey guys, I want to talk to you today about two different energy systems and which programs support them, and some of the pros and some of the cons, so that when you're making your choices, you can easily make those decisions based on the outcome and based on how you want to feel. Okay? Because some of these things have immediate impacts and some of them not so much. But we're going to talk about that so that you have an idea of what that might look like so you can be in control of your own situation. Okay? We're going to talk about fat burn. Okay, fat burn is keto, like being in a ketogenic plan where your body's actually tapping into stored body fat for energy or using fat as the primary source of energy. Okay, and that fat could be body fat. It doesn't necessarily have to be consumed fat. Over here, carb and calorie burn. Okay, now both of these are calorie deficits. Both of them mean that if we decide to eat fewer calories than we're burning, then we're in a calorie deficit. Okay, you can do that in both states. Both will create weight loss. In a calorie deficit, you'll have weight loss in both. But here's what separates them. In a fat burn plan, you're going to have less hunger. Okay, that hunger is going to be just, let's just say it's a little bit more subtle. Like you might have that feeling of an empty stomach. You might feel like I could eat, but it's not the type of hunger that is like, I need to eat now or I'm going to die. Okay? After a couple of days of getting fat adapted or breaking through into fat burn by burning through your glycogen stores and everything, you will have sustained energy. This is also why intermittent fasting is so simple and easy in a fat burn state, because you're not dropping out of drastic levels of high carbohydrates and then having to burn through glycogen in order to get back in that situation again. You're literally just rolling into a fed state and then into a fasted state without all the ups and downs. Okay, and that's why that's effective for this particular plan. Then we have on this side, obviously, hunger, because we're on the clock. The minute we start, we're on the clock. We have sustained insulin levels, okay? So we're not getting too crazy as far as like the big spikes, but insulin is now present in the system. It's going to start the digestive system. Everything's moving along. We're on the clock, okay? So what that means is, yes, every 2.5 to 3 hours, you will be hungry, and it could potentially be, I need to eat now type of hunger, okay? And this would be with carbohydrates present. Remember, we have some carbs present in 5 and 1, but it's not quite that same level of hunger. This would be like I'm doing 24, 36, 54 grams of carbs, or I have no idea how many carbs I'm doing per meal, and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm hungry. Okay, I gotta hit the drive-through at McDonald's because I'm not gonna make it to whatever because I forgot a fueling or whatever the case is. Okay, energy reported higher in a fat burning state. We'll get into that a little bit later down here. Mental clarity. Okay, mental clarity because of just some of the properties of fat burn and ketones and how your body is able to process things just a little bit easier in the ketogenic state. Plus, you don't have these ups and downs, the blood sugars, that kind of thing. But the mental clarity, but I'm going to also argue that over here, the mental clarity and the focus, because over here, a lot of times we're focusing on what our next meal is or what we're going to eat next, because we're in that state of kind of like constant hunger. Like we know every 2.5 to 3 hours we need to eat. So what's great about 5 and 1 in that situation is you know what's coming up. You know it's going to be a simple fueling, right? So that's pretty easy. But if you're into, we'll talk about which programs those are. Okay, we'll talk about that. All right. Inflammation. Inflammation tends to come down just because of the properties, once again, of being in a ketogenic state and the low insulin response and that kind of stuff. Over here, it may be reduced because you've reduced the types of foods that cause inflammation, and it will also be reduced because of the fat loss. A balanced carbohydrate and protein and fat level, or balanced insulin, I should say, is going to help create some loss of inflammation, but not as dramatically as being in a fat burning state because of the ketosis, okay, or because of the process of ketosis. Lactic acid, if you're exercising, missed this one. Sustained energy for exercisers too. Sustained energy, again, kind of like that less hunger. Like you can miss a meal and still be hungry. You can still have energy because you're tapped into your fat stores for a long period of time. This goes for distance runners, cyclists, Well, boot camp is generally 60 minutes, but it's about a HIIT workout or something like that. It's going to be sustained. Whereas when carbohydrates are present, once you bring them in, you're going to have those ups and downs and those dips. Okay. So again, sporadic. And here's the interesting thing about sporadic in a non-fat burning state. You could have energy right after you eat, depending on how long that is. Like, you have to take a look at that personally and see, I just ate, I have this great energy until my next meal. Okay. And remember, this isn't to be confused with 5 in 1. Okay. This is like you eating, like what most people would say is, I'm eating normal or I'm eating healthy or whatever. So after they do that, they might feel really great. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, some people, after they eat, they actually feel more tired. Okay, so pay attention to after meals and before meals. They both say after meals. After meals or... Okay, after meals, it increases. That's why there's arrow there. Increases. Okay, energy increases after you eat, or energy decreases after you eat. And there's some things you can do to adjust that and fix that as well. Okay, for exercise, lactic acid. Less at lactic acid when in a fat burning state, which means you may be able to do your high intensity interval training without that burn and that pump, so that you can go longer, harder, and maybe even heavier. Okay? Over here, you get that pump, you get that burn, you're walking up a hill or stairs and your legs are on fire and you have to actually stop because of the pump pain. Okay? Or you are unable to get the last couple repetitions because of the pump pain. Now, depending on your goals, this may be important. Like, creating this environment in your muscles might be important. But if your goal is just typically maintain or maybe increase muscle a little bit, but decrease body fat, I'm not so concerned about that. Or if your goal is to kick butt in a cardiovascular event, a CrossFit, or maybe a boot camp class or a high intensity interval training class, I'm not concerned about that, right? I just want the best experience, the most energy, the less pain and suffering from the lactic acid as possible. Okay? Now, here are the cons of following a plan like this. You do need to follow it perfectly, because there's a small window to where you're not following that plan anymore, and you're over here automatically without even trying to. Okay? And that's a bad situation, because if you want the benefits here, you don't want to be dipping over here, okay, because you're following what I would call a dirty 5 in 1 or a dirty plan. You do need to track the macros so you know what those numbers are, so that you can make those adjustments, because some of those numbers are going to be different for other people. You might have a 5 to 10, 15, 20 gram window that you get to work with to feel your best and stay in that fat burn. And then you also have margin of error based on some body compositions and that kind of thing, which may be off a little bit, and you have to adjust manually. But if you don't know your numbers, you can't adjust manually. Okay? You are limited in your carbs. Okay? So no bites or snacks, or I just want to have this, because that will take you out of your window and you'll be out of fat burn. Sounds harsh, but it's true. How long will you be out of fat burn? As long as it takes you to burn through that glycogen stores and tap back in to that stored body fat. Goof ups will show up on the scale rapidly. Okay, when in that threshold, or when in that fat burning metabolism, your kidneys are treating everything differently. How your body stores water, how it stores glycogen, how it stores essentially just about everything. That is at a point where things are just flowing. Whoa, just threw my marker. Flowing. Okay. Now, if I bring carbs in, everything stops. Body wants to store again. Okay, not store body fat. Don't get confused with storing body fat unless you ate too many calories or stopped moving. What we're talking about here is the glycogen, the carbohydrates in the muscle with more water. So there's going to be about 3 or 4 grams of water with that glycogen. Okay, so the carbohydrate. That goes into the muscle and that stays there. The kidneys change from just flowing to just storing a little bit. Now you get on the scale, you're up, depending on how many carbohydrates you had, anywhere to immediately, I'm going to say like a pound, possibly 2. But if you had a significant amount of carbohydrates, it could be up to 6. Okay? Literally overnight. If you're an athlete, it's going to be higher, because your body's been conditioned to have more insulin sensitivity and store more in the muscle cell so it has it available for your workouts. That's what you've been training it to do. So that's actually a really, really good thing. And when you understand that, you can use that to your benefits in your activities. Okay? So yeah, and that could mess with your head. And if you can't deal with that, then with that scale going up and down and being confused with that all the time, then the best thing is to do is stick with the plan and make sure that you don't have those goof ups or those choices. If that's how important it is to you, that doesn't happen. If carbs are present, then you're going to go out and have a cupcake, and there's going to be no change. There's going to be no drastic up or down. So no fluctuation, and that's can be okay, except for there's no what happens when this happens over here. You dial things in. If you have goals, you're like, oh, dang, I don't like seeing that, but I know why. So I'm not going to I can justify it, but I'm going to correct it because that's not my goal. If you're over here, you're kind of like, I had a cupcake and look, I still lost a half a pound. I'm going to have 2 cupcakes tomorrow, right? So that's not the way it works, by the way. Because we're still in a calorie deficit, we can lose body fat even with cupcakes. But and because we had it present the whole time, there wasn't a drastic up and down in the glycogen retention. So remember that. That's a huge thing. If you understand those 2 concepts right there, you're going to be so mentally prepared for success. It's crazy. Okay, you do have a ceiling for protein. That's a con over here. Because if you feel like you just want to eat and chew on more food, sometimes it's nice to do that with a chicken breast or some additional steak or some lunch meat or whatever you like to do, maybe cheese stick, whatever. There is a ceiling. You have a limitation of how much additional protein you can have in order to stay in that great fat burn. If you're over here, there's no ceiling. I don't care if you have 200 grams of protein. You can have 160 grams of protein. You can have 300, as long as it fits your calorie deficit and you're still under the amount of calories that you're burning, or that you're burning more calories than you're eating, then you're fine. Okay? And here's the killer. Here's the most important thing. You can systematically move into other phases when you're doing this because you know where you are, you know what you can change, and you just keep moving from phase to phase to phase. Over here, if you're not tracking, because you don't have to, because it's not as specific other than calories. If you're not tracking, then you're going to need to learn how to track so that you can move into the next process. So this is just preparing you and setting you up for even more success. This, if that's exciting to you that you don't have to track, then you're going to have to at some point learn if you get frustrated with your progress and your success. Over here, so many people stumble into their next phases. They don't know where they are. They don't know what got them there. They can't really explain it to anybody else. They just know that they lost some weight. They feel pretty good. Kind of hungry. They still talk about food all the time, right? Because they have these windows of hunger and non-hunger. But over here, typically, there's less of that kind of conversation going on, just because it's not they're not so focused on that. So this is kind of more diet mentality, and this is more like what I would say is more lifestyle mentality. But that's just me. Like this, depending on your lifestyle, because if your lifestyle is to have carbohydrates on a regular basis, which some people are working towards that, we're going to get into the transition and how that gets to work for you. And that way there's no confusion in that. But here are the plans that we have to be very careful with explaining, because this is 5-in-1, okay, with the parameters that are met. And this is like your dirty 5-in-1, so your mistakes that you make on 5-in-1 feel like this. Your 4-in-2 and your 3-in-3. Those are calorie deficit or carbohydrate present programs. They will create weight loss because you're going to try to be in a calorie deficit. The fat burn, again, will be a completely different feeling than that feeling over there, and that's the biggest point that I want to make. So, guys, hopefully that was helpful to somebody. If this is, make sure you comment below. Make sure you give me some likes, because I want to know what you're interested in learning, and if this is helpful to you, we can dissect this even further, get into some more information on that. So, anyway, just a real quick impromptu video on this. Hopefully that was helpful, and guys, make it a great day. We got this.